Hello everyone, and greetings to all lovers of stories across time. Welcome to our science storytelling channel, where each video is a journey through the history of Earth. Today, we will listen together to the rhythm of life, from the primordial creatures gliding through the Cambrian oceans, to the giant dinosaurs dominating the land, from pioneering birds soaring in the skies, to the lineages of Homo sapiens leaving their mark of intelligence and culture. Imagine 4.5 billion years of Earth's history, an epic that has never ceased. Every ocean, every forest, every plain and mountain is a note, where life evolves, adapts, and overcomes catastrophic events to endure. Each creature, whether small or mighty, contributes to the ecological web and the grand story of the planet today. We invite you to walk with us, to contemplate the slow rhythm of geological time, to feel the pulse of biological life unfolding over millions of years, and to witness Homo sapiens, the species that stepped beyond biological limits to write memory, art, and culture. Each chapter of life's history reveals surprises, lessons, and a profound appreciation for the world around us. Subscribe and follow the channel so you don't miss any journey of life, from the primordial seas to the grasslands, forests, and savannas where humans now thrive. Join us in exploring Earth's story, where past, present, and future merge into an epic symphony that has never ended. In its earliest days, Earth had not yet donned the gentle green of forests, nor the presence of animals, nor the familiar sounds of wind and flowing water. The ground blazed red and cracked, rivers of lava flowing endlessly from massive volcanoes, winding through the deep chasms of the planet's crust. Thick plumes of smoke and sulfur ash rose, mingling with layers of acidic clouds, forming a dense fog that rendered sunlight a mere flicker, a dim ember in a sky submerged in charcoal grey. Lightning pierced the dense air, striking hot springs or fissures in the rock, where rising steam provided energy for the first chemical reactions. The primordial oceans were far from tranquil. Their waters, hot and rich in salts, minerals, and organic compounds, shimmered in pale golden light tinged with fiery red, churning organic molecules into rudimentary chemical mixtures. Within each droplet, amino acids, nucleotides, and lipids collided, linked, and disintegrated, testing their capacity for self-organization and persistence. Each bubble, each dissolved mineral, each thermal current from the ocean floor became a note in a primordial symphony, awakening the latent potential of life amidst absolute chaos. The journey of life did not follow a straight path, nor could it be measured in days or years. It was an epic that stretched across billions of years, where the first notes sounded through RNA, proteins, and simple cells. Creation and destruction interwove. Anaerobic microbes vanished as oxygen appeared. Primitive lipid bubbles disintegrated under the waves, yet new mechanisms for survival emerged, forming small laboratories containing intricate chemical reactions. Each note in this epic was a chemical reaction, occurring within a harsh environment. Iron, silicon, and magnesium minerals dissolved in water, catalyzing the formation of complex polymer chains. Thermal energy from lightning and hydrothermal vents supplied energy for non-equilibrium reactions, and the slow currents of the early oceans stirred everything, challenging the nascent biochemical structures. Nature acted simultaneously as conductor and experimentalist, guiding lifeless molecules along a perilous evolutionary path. Amid the murky seas and blazing rocks, a question arose: where did the first life begin? In the dark ocean where sunlight barely penetrated and mineral-rich currents stirred organic molecules, or on the scorching rock surfaces, where thermal energy and lightning provided abundant energy for early reactions. Perhaps the first lipid bubbles formed upon rock, isolating RNA and enzymes as miniature laboratories of life, or perhaps in shallow ponds, where molecules self-arranged, linked, and formed enduring networks of reactions. This question remains unanswered, yet it opens the door to the entire chain of events, from the first RNA, single-celled organisms, and archaea, to the gradually spreading biodiversity of Earth. It reminds us that life did not originate from a single point, but from a network of reactions, experiments, cooperation, and competition on a chaotic yet potential-rich planet. Each droplet, each bubble, each lava stream contributed to the epic of life, stretching across billions of years, with sequences of creation and destruction unfolding continuously. The early Earth lacked a blue sky, forests, animals, and familiar sounds. The atmosphere was thick, a dense mixture of carbon dioxide, nitrogen, methane, and ammonia, entirely devoid of free oxygen. Sunlight pierced through volcanic haze, tinting rocks and oceans red, creating a world both ferocious and full of potential. On the surface, rivers of molten lava twisted and surged into chasms, transforming the land into fiery streams. Massive volcanoes expelled dense black smoke and sulfur ash, mixing with thick acidic mists, blocking sunlight and trapping heat on the young planet. This spectacle was not only grandiose, but also a source of essential energy and minerals, where Co and Shane in the atmosphere absorbed radiation, and methane and ammonia reacted under lightning to form the first organic molecules. In this realm, lightning was not merely a flash. It struck with energy that broke chemical bonds, activating amino acids, nucleotides, and lipid compounds. When these electric arcs descended upon hot ponds, rock fissures, and volcanic cracks, they combined with minerals such as iron, silicon, and magnesium dissolved in water, becoming natural catalysts for primitive chemical reactions. Each volcanic eruption, each rising plume of smoke, each lightning strike became a note in Earth's primeval symphony, where chemical reactions tested survival and persistence. And then water appeared. As the Earth's surface gradually cooled, water vapor condensed, and rains persisted for millions of years, accumulating in depressions to form the first shallow lakes. These lakes connected, expanding into seas, eventually forming the primordial oceans, hot and rich in dissolved minerals, their bubbling waters constantly stirring molecules. This vast reaction chamber allowed RNA, proteins, and protobionts to emerge. The water both shielded them from intense sunlight and provided a stable medium for chemical reactions. The oceans, together with the atmosphere and volcanoes, formed a continuous energy system, where nature acted as both conductor and immense laboratory. Within those ponds and fissures, simple molecules linked, disintegrated, and continually experimented. Primitive lipid bubbles, or protobionts, appeared, isolating internal reactions from the harsh environment. RNA molecules that stored information and catalyzed reactions gradually formed, marking the first steps toward heredity in Water's archaea appeared, drifting, exchanging chemical energy, paving the way for subsequent biological transformations. This world remained chaotic. Volcanoes erupted, lightning flashed continuously, acid rain fell, yet this disorder created the necessary conditions for primitive life. Every molecule, every protobient, every RNA was an experiment, each step a patient stride along the path of evolution. The dense atmosphere and mineral-rich oceans created a physical and chemical stage, laying the foundation for all complex organisms to follow. This was the beginning, where the rules of evolution and biodiversity began to take shape, opening the next chapter of life on Earth. In the thick sky, lightning suddenly flared, cutting through acidic mist and volcanic smoke, striking shallow ponds and scorching rock fissures. These flashes were not mere light, but vast sources of energy sufficient to break chemical bonds of simple molecules, causing them to rearrange and form more complex chains. Minerals such as iron, silicon, and magnesium dissolved in water from volcanic ash. Tiny suspended particles became natural catalysts, accelerating reactions and promoting the formation of primitive polymer chains from amino acids and nucleotides. Volcanic eruptions, each plume of black smoke, combined with the rhythmic flashes of lightning and bubbling ocean waters, created a symphony of energy, where every physical and chemical component resonated to test the viability of organic molecules. Within minerals and hot waters, primitive lipid bubbles appeared, isolating internal reactions from the harsh external environment, transforming each protobient into a natural laboratory where RNA and proteins could emerge, store information, and perform the first chemical reactions. Energy from lightning, heat from lava, minerals, and dim light all combined, creating the first chemical nurseries, where each reaction was an experiment, and each polymer chain a step toward life. Every explosion, every plume of smoke, every flash of light, everything stirred the atmosphere and oceans, driving early chemical reactions into a continuous cycle. From this chaos, the first patterns of life RNA, proteins, and archaea began to leave their mark on Earth, opening a new chapter in the planet's biological history. In shallow ponds and rock fissures, where minerals dissolved from volcanic ash and lava continued to radiate heat, simple organic molecules began to collide, bond, and break apart in the silent rhythm of chemistry. Each amino acid, each nucleotide seemed to find its counterpart in warm water cavities, where dissolved iron and magnesium ions acted as natural catalysts, accelerating chemical bonds. Weak sunlight filtering through dense mist provided not only heat but also photon energy to stimulate reactions, transforming simple molecules into increasingly complex structures, step by step toward life. From these interactions, primitive lipid bubbles, protobient seep emerged. They were not merely inert sacks of matter. They were natural laboratories, isolating internal reactions from the hostile environment. The lipid membranes maintained stable temperatures and ion concentrations, enabling RNA and proteins to test new bonds and experiment with diverse chemical configurations without being destroyed by surrounding lava or lightning. Some protobients accumulated sufficient material and energy to sustain internal reactions, becoming early self-organizing systems, the precursors of true cells, RNA. Molecules that both stored information and catalyzed reactions formed within these favorable water cavities, becoming the seeds of heredity. The first RNA chains replicated with low efficiency, yet enough to preserve critical biological information, laying the foundation for evolution. RNA existed not merely as a molecule, but as a bridge between inorganic matter and life, where pure chemical reactions gradually transformed into self-sustaining biological systems. In hot, mineral-rich waters, archaea drifted slowly, exchanging chemical energy with surrounding minerals and organic molecules, operating silently, without occupying space aggressively. They formed a primitive living network, connecting protobionts and RNA over millions of years. These exchanges of energy and matter established stable chemical cycles, creating conditions suitable for the emergence of eukaryotic cells and multicellular life. Protobionts, RNA, and archaea did not merely exist. They became pillars of evolution. They transformed a purely chemical mixture into a system capable of replication, adaptation, and interaction. Each lipid bubble, each RNA chain, each archaeon was a survival experiment, a small but crucial step, contributing to the multi-billion-year symphony of life on Earth, where every reaction, every energy exchange, every microscopic change set the stage for future biodiversity. Although early Earth remained chaotic, with thermal storms tearing through lava flows, erupting volcanoes, and acid rain scouring hot rocks, this very chaos created the conditions for life. Every first RNA, every emerging protobiont, every primitive cell was a patient experiment where molecules self-organized, tested their capacity to maintain, replicate, and adapt to extreme environments. These processes unfolded slowly, step by step, like the breathing of geology, silently forming the fundamental structures for enduring life. In hot, mineral-rich oceans, where iron, magnesium, and silicon dissolved in water, sunlight filtered through mist, and lightning struck shallow ponds. RNA stored information, protobionts experimented with chemical reactions, and archaea exchanged energy with minerals and organic molecules. Each link in this chain created a primitive network, where every reaction and every chemical transformation contributed to survival and evolution. It was not only RNA or protobionts, but also volcanic heat, lightning energy, pressure, and the chemistry of early oceans, all acting as instruments in the first biological symphony, unlocking the potential for persistence and development. Furthermore, this chaos generated diverse microenvironments, shallow ponds, mineral-rich rock crevices, salt lakes, lava valleys that occasionally cooled, all serving as natural laboratories where RNA, proteins, and primitive cells tested energy exchange mechanisms, accumulated materials, and interacted biologically. From these microscopic interactions, complex cells, diverse microorganisms, and the first genetic systems gradually emerged, laying the groundwork for multicellular life hundreds of millions of years later. These chains of interactions gradually transformed Earth into a vibrant and dynamic planet, where life spread from the deep ocean floor to the harsh surface, from single-celled organisms to multicellular forms, from microbes to increasingly complex creatures. Each molecule, each lipid bubble, each primitive cell was a crucial step in evolution, turning chemical and physical chaos into a sustaining, adaptable, and resilient biological system. Within the interplay of harsh climate, minerals, energy, and chemical reactions, Earth found the capacity to generate life not perfect, but persistent, resilient, and full of potential, laying the foundation for the entire history of biology. The world belonged entirely to bacteria, cyanobacteria, and anaerobic microorganisms, single-celled life drifting through murky oceans rich in minerals, salts, and primordial organic compounds. Some took refuge in volcanic crevices, where extreme temperatures and pressures posed severe survival challenges, while others floated in shallow hot ponds, where sunlight barely penetrated the thick acidic mist. Each cell was a link in a primitive, living network, exchanging energy, absorbing minerals, and testing chemical reactions, sustaining life quietly in the isolation granted by nature. Each movement and interaction of these cells contributed to the formation of primitive biological laws, where self-maintenance, adaptation, and competition began to leave their mark on Earth. Amid that seemingly unchanging silence, a group of cyanobacteria began harvesting sunlight. They converted light energy into chemical energy through photosynthesis, releasing oxygen into the oceans. At first forming only tiny gas bubbles, they gradually dispersed through the water column, mixing into the dense atmosphere, slowly transforming the surrounding environment. These first traces of oxygen, invisible yet powerful, triggered the Great Oxidation Event, a geological and biological turning point from which the Earth system could not revert. Oxygen became a destroyer to many anaerobic microorganisms, eliminating numerous groups and leaving ecological gaps in oceans and lakes. Surviving organisms had to alter their lifestyles or disappear. Yet simultaneously, oxygen provided a powerful energy source, allowing organisms capable of using it to exchange energy more efficiently, accelerate metabolic processes, and open new evolutionary pathways, enabling cells to develop more complex structures and eventually cooperate as multinucleate biological units. Oceans, water channels, and hot sediment layers trembled under the influence of oxygen. Iron and other minerals oxidized, the seabed turned bright red, and chemical reactions continually transformed. Energy from sunlight, volcanic eruptions, and hot water flows combined to create a continuous experimental environment. Meanwhile, RNA enzymes and protobians silently tested new bonds, sought adaptation, stored information, and accumulated energy within an atmosphere changing day by day, century by century. In the rare moments of calm amid the chaos, a question echoed. Through the flow of time, from toxic gases to breathable air, who will benefit from this new atmosphere? It would be the organisms capable of using oxygen cooperative, more complex cells that would inherit the new land and atmosphere. They would inaugurate the era of multinucleate, multicellular life, laying the foundation for biodiversity, gradually colonizing oceans, lakes, and eventually the surface of Earth. Silently and patiently, the primordial living network transformed a planet once shrouded in toxic gases into a home for complex organisms, opening the next chapter of life's history where chemical experiments, energy exchanges, and adaptation quietly generated unprecedented opportunities. The world still belonged entirely to bacteria, cyanobacteria, and anaerobic microorganisms, single-celled life drifting in murky oceans where hot waters rich in minerals mixed with volcanic ash and primordial organic compounds. Some sheltered in volcanic fissures or shallow ponds where extreme temperatures and pressures challenged all forms of life. Each cell, each group of organisms, was a link in the primordial living network, exchanging energy, absorbing minerals, testing chemical reactions, and quietly sustaining life. The surrounding environment remained silent. No sound, no green, only bubbling waters, steam rising from the ocean floor, and sunlight filtering through thick mist, creating a dim yet dynamic backdrop where all changes unfolded to the slow rhythm of geological time. Within these water cavities, a group of cyanobacteria began to harness sunlight. They converted light energy into chemical energy through photosynthesis, releasing oxygen as tiny gas bubbles that rose from the water, dispersing through the ocean and seeping into the dense atmosphere. Gradually, oxygen accumulated, producing unprecedented changes on the planet, dense mist began to transform. Toxic gases such as methane and sulfide declined, and chemical reactions in the water and sediments continually shifted to follow the new oxygen regime. The Great Oxidation event, geological and biological turning point, originated from the invisible actions of microorganisms. Yet its effects were powerful, pervasive, and irreversible. Oxygen, lethal to many anaerobic microorganisms, wiped out entire groups of ancient life, leaving vast ecological gaps in oceans and lakes. Yet these gaps also created opportunities. Organisms capable of using oxygen gained abundant energy, metabolized faster, grew more robustly, and developed new evolutionary pathways. They became pioneering cells, learning cooperation, accumulating energy, and forming complex structures, the foundation for multinucleate, multicellular life, and the early complex ecosystems that would follow. Oceans, water channels, and sediment layers vibrated in response to atmospheric changes. Iron and other minerals on the seafloor oxidized, staining sediments bright red, while chemical reactions continued to experiment with new bonds. RNA, enzymes, and protobionts silently adapted to the oxygen-rich environment, expanding their range, while testing more complex energy exchange mechanisms. Remaining anaerobic microorganisms had to survive in shallow water pockets or disappear, giving way to cells that were more evolved, resilient, and flexible. Amid Earth's silent transformation, the question persisted through the timeline, from toxic gases to breathable air. Who will benefit from this new atmosphere? It would be the organisms that could harness oxygen, cooperative cells that accumulated energy and developed complex exchange mechanisms that would step onto a new stage. They paved the way for multinucleate, multicellular life, forming early ecosystems and laying the groundwork for the biodiversity Earth would witness over billions of years, from the depths of the oceans to barren surfaces, from single-celled life to increasingly complex organisms, continuing the next chapter of life's history as oxygen seeped into murky oceans. A world once dominated solely by bacteria and cyanobacteria suddenly trembled. Hot, mineral-rich waters, once home to anaerobic microorganisms surviving through silent chemical energy exchanges, now faced an invisible but deadly threat: oxygen. Cells unable to adapt quickly ceased activity, metabolism faltered, and many groups perished en masse, leaving vast gaps in the primordial living network. The oceans were no longer tranquil. Waves foamed as tiny gas bubbles from photosynthesis rose, weaving through rock fissures and iron-rich red sediments. Sunlight filtered through the dense mist, illuminating shallow ponds where anaerobic life persisted, casting flickering streaks of light across steaming surfaces. In the deeper waters, microorganisms tried to hide within the scorching volcanic fissures, but the oxygen-rich air penetrated, disrupting chemical reactions and the energy-sustaining life. Silent organisms disintegrated, while gas bubbles rose, around them like ghostly marks of their demise. Seafloor sediments turned crimson. Iron oxidized and scattered throughout, forming a vivid yet merciless carpet. Red streaks, pale gold of minerals mingling with rising foam, stood as visual testimony to destruction. Scorching volcanic fissures and shallow hot ponds became death fields, where the last anaerobic cells struggled before vanishing. Each froth, each rising bubble, each streak of red sediment became a beat in the tragic symphony of early life. As anaerobic life failed, organisms capable of using oxygen emerged. They grew rapidly, metabolized efficiently, accumulated energy, and formed complex cellular communities. These pioneering cells exploited the ecological gaps left by the extinct anaerobes, colonizing waters, shallow ponds, and volcanic fissures once dominated by ancient microorganisms. Oxygen was not merely a threat, it was a potent driver of evolution, enabling the formation of increasingly complex structures, the precursors of multinucleate, multicellular life, and future biodiversity. In rare moments of calm amid the chaos, RNA, enzymes, and protobians quietly tested new bonds, adapting to the oxygen-rich environment. Chemical reactions persisted, surviving chains recorded genetic information and expanded evolutionary potential. Extinction was not an absolute end but a beginning for a new era. Viewed as a whole, the scene of crimson sediments, rising gas bubbles, steaming hot fissures, and foaming waves resembled a grand symphony of destruction and rebirth. From the ecological void created by oxygen, cooperative and more complex cells stepped onto a new stage. They became the pioneers of multinucleate multicellular life, laying the foundation for biodiversity across the planet, from the deepest ocean floors to barren surfaces. A new world arose from the remains of anaerobic microorganisms, resilient, strong, and full of promise for billions of years to come. As oxygen from cyanobacteria and photosynthetic microorganisms seeped into every pond, volcanic fissure, and murky ocean layer, once toxic gases began transforming into breathable air. Tiny gas bubbles rose through hot, mineral-rich waters, breaking the surface and bursting in the dim light filtered through the mist, forming pale white foams on the waves. Seafloor sediments, saturated with oxidized iron, stained red across volcanic fissures, stretching like silent fire carpets across the ocean floor. In this transforming scene, anaerobic microorganisms, once rulers of every pond and fissure, could no longer survive. They writhed, shrank, and gradually disintegrated in oxygen-rich waters, leaving vast ecological gaps. Billions of cells were silently destroyed, creating a muted climax. Oceans resounded with the absence of the vanquished, where oxygen burned away the old power. Amid this chaos and destruction, a question resonated in the slow rhythm of geological time. From toxic gases to breathable air, who will benefit from this new atmosphere? It was not the dying anaerobes, but the cells that could harness oxygen, exchange energy, and cooperate that would inherit the new land and atmosphere. These pioneering organisms would build complex structures, form multinucleate cells, inaugurate the multicellular era, and from there, lay the foundation for biodiversity to rise across all of Earth. Beneath the dim light and within the vibrating waters, RNA, enzymes, protobians, and cells capable of utilizing oxygen continued to quietly experiment, adapt, and spread. Life, though having lost many anaerobic warriors, persisted with resilience, opening a new chapter in which the old chaos became the foundation for a rich and enduring biological universe. After billions of years of experimentation and transformation, a subtle but significant turning point occurred in the oceans. Solitary cells began to recognize the potential of cooperation. No longer merely drifting individual entities in murky currents, they began sharing energy, exchanging chemical products, and accumulating internal structures, such as nuclei, mitochondria, and plastids. The nucleus emerged as a sophisticated control center, managing energy, storing information, and coordinating intracellular chemical reactions. Mitochondria became energy factories producing ATP, while plastids in early algal lineages began capturing light to produce food. The emergence of these organelles transformed simple cells into flexible entities capable of long-term connection and collaboration, laying the groundwork for more complex multicellular structures in shallow ponds, fissures, and mineral-rich ocean cavities. These cells gradually gathered into primitive assemblies, linked by cell membranes or specialized protein strands. They generated a new rhythm of life. Oxygen energy was shared, chemical products propagated, chemical signals transmitted, and self-protection capabilities increased. Each gas bubble from photosynthesis, each mineral particle absorbed, each current of hot or cold water flowing through rock fissures became part of a vast experimental network. The ocean's rhythm remained slow, gentle waves trembling on the surface, weak light filtering through dense mist and thick water layers, illuminating the cooperating cells, emphasizing the patience and persistence of evolution. Within this rhythm, the first multicellular life network silently took shape. Step by step, cooperative cells did not merely survive. They began forming more complex assemblies. One cell supported the metabolism of another. A group of cells could envelop others, shielding them from temperature fluctuations, chemical changes, or local oxygen depletion. This marked a critical transition from unicellular to multicellular life. Cells began storing energy, sharing responsibilities, and forming specialized structures. Early multicellular algae, primitive fungi, and multicellular protists emerged from these assemblies, layer by layer, forming small thickets in the ancient oceans. Each structure testified to adaptive capacity and cooperation, extending evolutionary potential toward increasingly complex forms. In the silence of the ancient oceans, the story of life continued, quietly yet steadfastly. Each connecting cell, each forming cluster, each exchanged current of energy, each rising gas bubble prepared the stage for an unprecedented biological explosion. This slow but continuous rhythm, spanning millions of years, would lead to the emergence of microalgal forests, rich, multicellular networks, and ultimately lay the foundation for Earth's entire future biodiversity. As individual cells began cooperating and forming nuclei, cell assemblies gradually developed into the first organisms with complex structures, unveiling a previously unseen early multicellular world. In shallow ponds and mineral-rich fissures, multicellular algae appeared, their cellular filaments interlinking to form soft yet durable networks, winding with the flow of water. Weak sunlight filtered through dense mist, illuminating fragile algal leaves, forming Earth's first photosynthetic carpets. Light energy was captured, distributed, and nourished internal cells, establishing an internal symbiotic life where each cell not only survived individually but also supported the growth of the entire structure simultaneously. Simple fungi appeared on the seafloor, anchoring to mud and mineral-rich rocks. They extended networks of hyphae, absorbing nutrients from the environment, distributing energy to linked cells, and generating symbiotic microorganisms around them. These fungal networks were stationary, yet their persistence and transformed them into ecological pillars, maintaining chemical and energy balance in the early oceans. The concurrent emergence of multicellular algae and fungi marked a stage when life was no longer solitary, beginning to form complex systems where material and energy exchange became vital. The ocean's rhythm remained slow. Gentle waves trembled. On the surface, light filtered through thick water layers and sediments, illuminating microalgal mats that reflected hues of green, red, and pale gold, rising and falling with each wave. Small multicellular organisms interacted with their environment. Oxygen from photosynthesis was utilized. Chemical products exchanged, distributed, and accumulated within the cellular network, helping each cell adapt to changing conditions and expand structural scale. Every algal filament, fungal mat, and cellular connection became a link in a larger web of life, laying the foundation for increasingly complex biological structures. In the quiet of the ancient oceans, this complex cellular network silently unlocked vast evolutionary potential. Multicellular protists formed, accumulating specialized structures, preparing for a biological era filled with diversity. Microalgal forests on the seafloor resembled living carpets, undulating with the slow rhythm of the waves, each pulse serving as an evolutionary lesson for connected cells. From here, biological capacity accumulated, interactive potential increased, and the stage was set for an unprecedented biological explosion where the oceans became a theater for complex diversity. From tiny multicellular organisms to the abundant life forms that would emerge hundreds of millions of years later, the rhythm of the oceans during this period unfolded slowly, like pages of a geological book turning just centimeters over millions of years. Sunlight penetrated the thick waters, diffusing through the lingering mist, casting faint rays of pale yellow and bluish light that threaded through the microalgal forests stretching across the seafloor. Each slender, multicellular algal filament swayed with the currents, undulating like a soft yet resilient carpet. Every wave was a subtle, silent movement, yet full of rhythm. These algae absorbed light for photosynthesis, exchanged chemicals with their surrounding environment, and accumulated biomass, forming new biological layers. Through the filtered light, tiny oxygen bubbles from photosynthesis rose, creating sparkling points of light that wove through the algal networks and illuminated the reddish-brown sediments, where iron and other minerals had accumulated over millions of years. These sediments were not merely the seafloor, but a surface rich in chemical energy, where cells absorbed minerals and exchanged metabolites with one another. Thick, soft muds trembled gently with the wave rhythm, as if the ancient ocean were breathing slowly, each pulse a subtle experiment, a delicate motion of geological time. Multicellular fungi appeared amidst the algal mats, anchoring to rocks and mineral-rich mud. Their hyphal networks expanded, distributing energy and nutrients to connected cells, while creating a diverse microbial environment around them. Stationary yet resilient, each hyphal strand acted as a bridge linking cells, reinforcing early multicellular cooperation. The interaction between fungi and algae produced a primitive but dynamic community, where energy and materials flowed continuously, quietly yet persistently. Each microalgal forest, each fungal hypha, each oxygen bubble moved slowly but with its own rhythm, evoking a sense of geological time where changes occurred silently yet permanently. In the silence of the ancient oceans, shades of blue, pale yellow, and reddish-brown intertwined across the sediment layers, revealing intricate details of the multicellular networks. These microalgal forests were not merely habitats, but natural laboratories, where cells learned to cooperate, exchange energy, and adapt, laying the foundation for more complex multicellular organisms and paving the way for an unprecedented biological explosion in the millions of years to come. Beneath the thick waters, where pale sunlight filtered through sediments and residual mist, microalgal forests stretched like living carpets. Soft algal filaments undulated with the slow wave rhythm. Tiny oxygen bubbles rose, and blue and reddish-brown light interwove across mineral-rich mud patches. Multicellular fungi anchored to the seafloor, their hyphal networks expanding, distributing energy and nutrients, and creating favorable conditions for neighboring cells. Each cooperative cell, each multicellular network, silently learned to share energy, exchange chemicals, accumulate organelles, and adapt to its environment. The ocean's rhythm remained slow, waves undulating like the breaths of geological time. Yet within this silence, the foundation for biodiversity had been established. The seas were ready for an unprecedented explosion, where multicellular organisms from algae and fungi to protist wood emerge, inaugurating a rich and complex biological era, marking the next chapter in the billion-year-long epic of life on Earth. The Cambrian oceans flared like a living stage, where every current teemed with dense organisms, moving ceaselessly in the faint light filtering through water and sediment. New forms appeared in abundance, exoskeleton-bearing animals glinting under scattered light, branching appendages reaching outward, finely tuned sensory organs straining with every vibration, complex eyes flickering, capturing light, penetrating the surface, tracing every subtle movement of each creature. The first predators lurked amidst the dense layers of life, their flexible bodies stretching and contracting, eyes scanning everywhere, hunting and navigating the earliest food chains. Each organism was an independent entity, yet simultaneously a link in the emerging ecological network, where every collision, chemical reaction, and motion contributed to the distinctive living rhythm of the Cambrian oceans. The unprecedented morphological diversity made each water layer resemble a moving painting, where organs, appendages, sensory structures, and shells reflected light like countless tiny sparks, vibrating to a rapid, continuous biological rhythm. Glittering plates clashed, scattering light across different water layers, producing a scene, both brilliant and chaotic, like a visual symphony of life. From these small experiments, Earth recorded nearly the entire repertoire of modern body designs, intricate spinal cords transmitting signals, flexible segmented limbs, protective exoskeletons, acute sensory organs, and complex locomotory structures. Predators and prey interacted according to the first predator-prey patterns, establishing an early ecological cycle already marked by balance and survival competition. Seafloor sediments shimmered under sunlight filtering through the water and tinged red, brown, and grey, while organisms moving across or adhering to these layers left trails of movement and feeding, like the music of time. Each new body, each predator, each failed or retreating organism contributed to the evolutionary symphony. This chaotic yet vibrant spectacle not only illustrated the rapid pace of life, but also revealed the power of evolutionary experimentation. Every structure, every appendage, every new sensory organ was tested, selected, and gradually became the foundation for subsequent biodiversity in the Cambrian oceans. Time seemed compressed and stretched simultaneously. Biological rhythms were fast, yet evolutionary processes unfolded over millions of years, imparting a sense of slow geological time. From shallow waters to deep troughs, each organism interacted with its environment, accumulated energy, developed survival strategies, and inaugurated an era of previously unseen morphological diversity. This was the stage from which nearly the entirety of modern animal body designs originated, preparing the lineages that would arise, branch, and spread across Earth over the following hundreds of millions of years. The Cambrian seas thrummed like a continuous stage, each current vibrating to the rapid pulse of life. Layers teemed with arthropods, their glinting exoskeletons flashing in sunlight filtering through the surface, their segmented limbs extending gracefully, swimming, hunting, and avoiding danger simultaneously. Complex eyes scanned the surroundings, recording every subtle motion, turning each individual into a living sensor within the emerging ecological network, where perception and reaction occurred in fleeting moments crucial for survival. The first predators lurked among dense organism layers, bodies flexible, limbs and senses coordinated like a perfected mechanism for tracking prey. Smaller organisms swam evasively, weaving through rock crevices and dense algal mats, responding through rapid reflex chains, creating a dynamic predator-prey dance. Each collision, each extension or withdrawal of limbs reflected the fast pace of life, where evolution continuously tested new survival strategies. Those able to match the rhythm thrived, while slower, drifting lineages were eliminated. The water layers of the Cambrian oceans resembled a continuously moving painting, sunlight passing through red, yellow, and pale brown sediments, reflecting off exoskeletons' eyes and appendages, producing a scene simultaneously chaotic and vivid. Organisms swimming through crevices, dancing along currents, generated small vortices, while stirred sediments wove among them, making every movement, every predatory action dramatically intense. Each experiment in body structure, sensory function, and locomotion was tested in real time. Limbs, protective shells, acute senses, and primitive nervous systems gradually became refined, recording nearly all of the modern body designs. The rapid pace of Cambrian ocean life turned every organism into a living link in the biological symphony. Predators attacked, prey evaded, collisions and avoidance created feedback waves that directly influenced ecosystem balance. Events occurred, continuously, chaotic yet rhythmic, with the success or failure of each organism recorded in the evolutionary current, driving unprecedented morphological diversity. Even in deeper layers, where light waned, organisms operated according to accelerated biological rhythms. Limbs of swimming animals moved with precision. Sensory organs extended to probe, and sensory structures received and responded to information. Each layer of life, from minute species to large predators, merged into a living tableau where color, light, motion, and chemical responses combined into an energetic, evolutionary panorama. The Cambrian explosion was marked not only by unprecedented morphological diversity but also by a continuous, chaotic yet harmonious rhythm of life, paving the way for the evolution of complex lineages from tiny marine animals to pioneering groups, preparing for hundreds of millions of years of subsequent development. Each movement, collision, and predatory strike was a note in the biological symphony, marking the moment Earth recorded nearly all modern body designs and setting the stage for an era of unparalleled biodiversity. The deep Cambrian seas became densely packed with life, like a living carpet in constant motion. Each water layer vibrated gently to the swimming rhythm of arthropods, their segmented limbs extending and bending, colliding and avoiding one another. Glittering exoskeletons, reflected sunlight piercing the surface, flickering in pale gold, silver, and muted blue, creating a scene both brilliant and chaotic. Complex eyes scanned every direction, recording the slightest motion in the densely populated environment, turning each organism into both predator and prey within the nascent ecological network. The first predators stalked silently, bodies coiling for attacks, while smaller organisms wove through rock crevices, algae, and dense organism networks, producing a vivid predator-prey dance in which pursuit and evasion occurred continuously. Red, brown, and pale yellow sediments were stirred by these movements, weaving through organisms and reflecting light through the water, transforming the deep sea into a living painting where every detail pulsed to the rapid tempo of evolutionary life. Clouds of sediment rose from the seafloor, merging with water currents, conveying the depth and density of the environment, giving observers the sense of a multicolored, constantly shifting ocean dot. Small organisms swam through sediment layers, their limbs and sensory organs reacting in an instant, while hard shells and locomotory structures reflected light like thousands of twinkling points. RNA, enzymes, and primitive structures continued to experiment with new bonds, adapting to the densely oxygenated, energy-rich waters while responding to mechanical and chemical collisions around them. Energy from sunlight, oxidative reactions, and warm water currents created a relentless experimental environment where every chemical reaction and cellular collision contributed to adjusting the evolving network. The scene of the deep sea became more multidimensional as organism groups interacted. Tiny individuals swam through long algal mats, predators slipped through crevices, shelled organisms reflected sunlight through murky water, and chemical reactions of sediments and minerals generated constantly shifting energy zones. Each predatory strike, each evasion, each tactile or mechanical response left its mark in the evolutionary symphony, testing nearly all modern body designs, appendages, protective shells, sensory organs, primitive nervous systems, and complex locomotory mechanisms. The entire Cambrian deep sea became a living stage, where movement, color, light, and chemical reactions fused into a scene both chaotic and inherently ordered. Failed organisms sank into sediment, survivors expanded their influence, and the nascent ecological network gradually stabilized in the fast yet challenging rhythm of life. This was the climax of the explosion, inaugurating an era of biodiversity, never before seen on Earth, where every collision, life, and death acted as a link in the evolutionary epic, recording nearly all body designs still used by modern organisms today. The Cambrian explosion was not only a moment when marine organisms became densely populated and morphologically diverse, but also a period that laid the foundation for nearly all modern body designs. Within this brief geological window, a multitude of organs, locomotory structures, primitive nervous systems, segmented limbs, protective exoskeletons, and refined sensory systems emerged simultaneously, as if the Cambrian Ocean were a vast biological workshop where every concept of a living body was tested. Each trial was verified in a harsh, competitive environment. Nimble predators, agile prey, every collision, evasion, or attack acted as a survival test, selecting the most optimal solutions. In this spectacle, every minute detail, glittering exoskeleton, an extending segmented limb, a complex eye-tracking light through the surface contributed to a dense ecological network, where evolution operated like a complex symphony. The geometric structures, locomotory mechanisms, sensory organs, and survival strategies that emerged in the Cambrian oceans did not simply vanish. They became templates, the basic modules that later evolution would use and expand. Primitive nervous systems guided reflexes, segmented limbs enabled movement and predation. Protective exoskeletons ensured survival of all structural elements that modern lineages still rely upon, despite hundreds of millions of years of geological and biological change. In the deep waters, red yellow-brown sediments were stirred by currents and organism movements, while light filtering through the water illuminated exoskeletons, eyes, and sensory organs, creating a vivid scene both chaotic and harmonious, reflecting the rapid and relentless rhythm of Cambrian life. The Cambrian Ocean became the largest experimental stage in the history of life. Every collision, every rapid reflex, every success or failure of an organism was recorded in the evolutionary network, establishing the rules of natural selection that subsequent organisms would inherit. This was the moment when modern morphological diversity first appeared, marking a decisive turning point, where Earth established body structures still visible in all animals today. From these early prototypes, evolution built complex lineages from small marine organisms to creatures with sophisticated limbs and sensory systems, paving the way for the terrestrial biological explosion hundreds of millions of years later. As a result, nearly all modern locomotory mechanisms, sensory systems, protective structures, and ecological patterns trace their origins to the Cambrian seas. Every link, from single cells to the first sensory organs, was tested, refined, and recorded in biological history, forming a solid foundation for evolution. The Cambrian explosion was not merely an event of biological diversification, it was a design milestone, where every body formula was written for the first time, opening the path for hundreds of millions of years of complex evolution and producing a biological legacy that successive generations of organisms would inherit and continually expand. The ancient ocean teemed with armored fish, bodies encased in sturdy scales, exoskeletons reflecting the faint sunlight penetrating the water, creating sparkling points like stars scattered across the deep sea. They glided past primitive coral reefs and seafloor sediments, sophisticated sensory organs scanning the space, detecting prey and avoiding contemporary predators. Shallow, warm waters at river mouths, tranquil ponds, and coastal rock crevices became testing grounds for the first organisms. Experimenting with the transition from water to land, early amphibians moved clumsily, stepping onto soft mud, climbing over roots, and gripping primitive mosses, testing their ability to adapt to drier conditions. On land, towering fern forests stretched like green carpets to the horizon, trunks rising high, broad fronds creating alternating patches of light and shadow, with sunlight filtering through the canopy into golden patches on the soil and roots. Amid the dense foliage, giant insects with sturdy bodies, wide wings or long legs moved, crawling along trunks and probing their surroundings with simple but sensitive eyes and tactile organs. They operated in a slow rhythm, interacting with one another and surrounding organisms, forming a rich yet quiet ecological network, where each organism was simultaneously strong and vulnerable, predator and prey in the early food chain. The seas and forests were not merely landscapes. They were vast evolutionary laboratories. Limbs, sensory organs, locomotory mechanisms, predatory behaviors, and survival strategies were tested in new environments, from water to land, from sunlight filtered through dense foliage to light reflected off red-brown sediments at the pond bottom, to fluctuating ground and water temperatures. Each individual, each group of organisms silently accumulated survival experience, adapted, diversified, and expanded into unexplored ecological niches. Thick sediments at the seafloor and in ponds, sometimes stirred by organism movements, reflected light through the water layers, forming a dynamic picture of ongoing evolution. Some layers of life persisted, others disappeared, each moment a biological trial as the vibrant oceans and primeval forests developed. Geological pressures, volcanic activity, and climate shifts accumulated, setting the stage for the Permian mass extinction, a global catastrophe wiping out nearly 90% of species. From the brilliant seas and primeval forests, millions of organisms perished, but the fortunate survivors became seeds for a new era. Every remnant of biomass and every leftover organism provided the conditions for recovery, adaptation, and further evolution, opening an era of richer and more complex biodiversity. In the quiet moment after the catastrophe, the ancient seas and forests still maintained the subtle rhythm of life. Every cell, every individual, every group of organisms continued to experiment, adapt, and grow. This world, with its turbid waters, red sediments, sunlight filtering through forest leaves, and organisms swimming or crawling slowly, was a place where geological time seemed to stand still. Yet evolution quietly advanced, preparing for the next great transformations in the history of life on Earth. After millions of years of experimentation in oceans, shallow ponds, and mineral-rich rock crevices, a decisive turning point occurred. The first organisms began to conquer land, leaving the stable, protective, aquatic environment. Early amphibians moved awkwardly across soft soil and decaying leaves, their limbs gradually adapting to new gravity. Locomotory organs transformed, lungs and skin gradually endured drier air, and the circulatory system adapted to transport oxygen. More efficiently, sensory organs from rudimentary eyes to chemical receptors on skin and tactile appendages operated continuously, detecting prey, avoiding danger, and gauging temperature and humidity. Every interaction with this new environment was a life or death trial, where water no longer provided a safe shield. Alongside amphibians, the first reptiles appeared, with strong fore and hind limbs, hardened scales protecting their bodies from dehydration and fluctuating temperatures, extending their exploration far from shallow waters. They slowly moved through towering fern forests, where massive trunks stretched skyward, dense canopies interlaced sunlight and shade, and the damp soil absorbed red sediments and organic matter. In the primeval forest, giant insects crawled, flew, and clung to trunks, probing their surroundings with simple yet sensitive eyes and tactile organs. These creatures operated in a slow rhythm, interacting with each other and their environment, forming a rich ecological network, diverse in behaviors, survival strategies, and body structures. The land became a vast experimental field. Light filtered through leaves, sediments, and damp soil, creating distinct ecological zones from riverbank mudflats and shallow ponds to primitive grasslands and dense forests. The first terrestrial organisms experienced day-night cycles, rainfall patterns, and competitive pressures, hunting, avoiding predators, accumulating energy, reproducing, and maintaining populations. Each individual, each small group, silently tested locomotory methods, survival strategies, and physiological adaptations, accumulating evolutionary experience for subsequent generations. The giant fern forests resembled living ecological carpets, with light flickering through the canopy, sediments, and scattered decaying leaves below. creating microhabitats rich in microorganisms and small organisms. Giant insects flew, crawled, and interacted with puddles, moss, and algae along ponds, while amphibians and reptiles explored, hunted, and avoided one another, forming a multi-dimensional ecological network. This slow yet continuous rhythm of life provided the foundation for crucial biological experiments. Limbs, sensory organs, respiratory mechanisms, drought tolerance, and survival strategies all being tested and recorded in the genetic network. Yet this ancient world was not eternal. As geological pressures, volcanic activity, climate change, and fluctuating water levels accumulated, a catastrophic event struck, the Permian mass extinction, wiping out nearly 90% of life on Earth. The surviving organisms endured extreme environmental changes, but from the remaining ash and sediments, the seeds of a new era began to grow. Life in seas, lakes, rivers, and on land continued quietly, but resiliently preparing for the next turning point in the history of life, an era of diversity, complexity, and transformation, where the survivors of the Permian opened a new chapter in evolution. After millions of years of evolution in oceans and on land, from armored fish, amphibians, reptiles to giant fern forests and enormous insects, Earth faced a terrifying turning point. The Permian mass extinction, about 250 million years ago. The planet's surface trembled under extreme geological and climatic upheavals. Volcanoes erupted relentlessly, burying lands in lava and ash. CO and toxic gases saturated the atmosphere, altering temperatures, producing acid rain, and depleting ocean oxygen. Sea levels fluctuated wildly, transforming shallow banks into deadwater lakes and fertile plains into barren fields. Oceans boiled, water layers overheated and became oxygen depleted, while on land, towering fern forests turned to ash, leaves rotted, trunks collapsed, and soils became lifeless. The once slow and stable rhythm of life became chaotic, ecological links severed, leaving both oceans and forests in deadly silence. Nearly the entire ancient ecosystem collapsed, about 90% of species disappeared. Armored fish, once dominant in the deep seas, floated in toxic waters, their sensory organs dim in the scalding heat. Early amphibians and reptiles could not find safe water, moving awkwardly on cracked mud. Fern forests and giant insects fell into ruin, their leaves, trunks, and fungal threads destroyed. Each organism, once a link in the dense ecological network, became a solitary witness to the catastrophe, with the slow, steady rhythm of the ancient era abruptly shattered by global devastation. However, amid the ashes, the fortunate survivors became the seeds of a new era. Individuals that endured extreme temperatures, excess oxygen, and scarce food quietly maintained their lineages. Within the damp red sediments and sun-scorched surfaces, some organisms found refuge in rock crevices, in remaining ponds, or among the ruins of forests. They bore witness to the resilience and extraordinary adaptability of life. Primitive, locomotory organs, limbs, sensory structures, and protective shells, the very features that enabled survival through the catastrophe, would become the seeds for new evolutionary directions, where life continued to flourish with increasingly inventive survival strategies. From ashes and chaos, evolution began to redraw the biological map. Surviving lineages accumulated experience, adapted to new environments, and gradually expanded into terrestrial and marine ecosystems. The remaining ponds became nurseries for amphibians and ancient aquatic animals, while rock crevices and sediment layers, containing microorganisms and fungi, continued to serve as foundational elements of the early food web. A phrase resonated through time like a deep beat amidst a geological storm. From the ashes of disaster, a new era will rise. From the remnants of the Permian, life prepared for a new chapter, one in which biodiversity and complexity both on land and in the seas would unfold more vigorously than ever, inaugurating the era of modern organisms and complex ecosystems that Earth would witness for hundreds of millions of years to come. After the Permian mass extinction, Earth was plunged into an unprecedented desolation. The oceans became suffocating, water layers heated to levels hostile to microorganisms, and ocean currents reversed, creating dead zones devoid of oxygen. Cracked, sun-scorched shorelines and barren riverbeds formed empty hollows, while once lush fern forests turned to ash, trunks collapsed, and leaves decayed, blanketing the ground. Red sediments from volcanic eruptions and ancient deserts accumulated thickly across plains, reflecting faint light, composing a muted and somber natural tableau. The once slow and carefully tested rhythms of life now echoed faintly amid the deathly silence. Within this chaotic aftermath, the lucky survivors quietly maintained the continuity of life. Early amphibians sought shelter in narrow water channels, clinging to damp mud. The first reptiles hid within sediment hollows, patiently observing their surroundings. Microorganisms and fungi clung to shallow seabeds or soil cavities, continuing to exchange energy and adapt to harsh conditions. These organisms carried evolutionary experience accumulated over millions of years, applying body structures, sensory organs, and survival strategies to endure the darkest period. Every small current of life, from inland ponds to ocean floors, from red sediment layers to ash-strewn forest canopies, became the foundation for a new biological era. Adaptation proceeded slowly but persistently. Survivors experimented with moving across dry land, exploiting remaining food, and maintaining physiological balance in unstable environments. Each individual was a biological seed, each group an experimental community for evolution, quietly preparing for the next phase of diversification and complexity. A phrase echoed through time, like a deep beat in a promising geological symphony. From the ashes of disaster, a new era will rise. These biological seeds heralded the emergence of new terrestrial and aquatic ecosystems, where survivors of the Permian would become pillars, building complex communities and laying the groundwork for the next waves of biological flourishing. From the ashes, from sunlight filtering through red sediments, Earth's slow but persistent rhythm of life began to revive, opening the next chapter in the history of life, where biodiversity would rise, complexity would increase, and the planet would be shaped by new evolutionary rules. The Triassic dawned after the Permian mass extinction. As Earth still recovered from desolation, cracked drylands interspersed with shallow ponds, and small meandering rivers traced like veins across the grey plains. Early reptiles and amphibians moved cautiously over the land, placing each step deliberately, their locomotory and respiratory systems gradually adapting to drier conditions, where water no longer provided protection. Within the waters, fish, shrimp, and small marine reptiles glided gently, navigating shallow currents, avoiding rare predators, while forming early food chains and establishing a slow but resilient rhythm of life. Low coniferous forests grew sparsely, creating shifting patches of light and shadow on the parched ground, sunlight filtering through the canopy to illuminate every step. Every shadow cast by a moving organism. By the Jurassic, the rhythm of life had expanded and grown more abundant. Broadleaf forests and towering ferns stretched to the horizon, each canopy spreading wide to cast shade, interspersed with pale golden sunlight filtering through, creating complex patches of light and shadow on the forest floor. Dinosaurs began to dominate plains, forests, and riverbanks. Herbivorous species moved in herds, massive bodies and sturdy limbs moving in sync, tails swinging, breathing and advancing under the dappled light of the canopy. Predators prowled, coordinating finely tuned senses, eyes scanning space, searching for opportunity. The oceans were equally lively. Large marine reptiles glided past primitive coral reefs, hunting fish and smaller creatures, composing a continuous predator-prey symphony. Waves, currents, sunlight penetrating water, stirred sediments all merged into the flowing, continuous, yet tense rhythm of the Jurassic. The Cretaceous reached the peak of diversity and complexity. Dinosaurs displayed fully developed modern traits: strong limbs, sharp teeth, protective scales or armor, acute senses. The first birds took flight, weaving through canopies, sometimes soaring across the sky, while small mammals hid in burrows, forest crevices, and ponds, moving quietly. The world became a continuously moving stage, where land, ocean, and sky moved in concert, each species hunting, avoiding, reproducing, and experimenting with survival strategies. The pace of life accelerated, became more varied, yet retained the imprint of long-term ecological rhythms, established in the Triassic and Jurassic. The long rhythms of the Triassic-Jurassic Cretaceous acted as successive chapters in a grand biological symphony. The Triassic slow and stable, laying foundations. The Jurassic expanding and complex, harmonizing marine and terrestrial ecologies. The Cretaceous reaching a climax, biodiversity exploding, organisms operating in continuous motion, preparing for the final dramatic act, the Chicxulub asteroid. Impact, firestorms, enveloping darkness, marking the mass extinction at the end of the Cretaceous. In the silence and desolation after the firestorm, tiny organisms would quietly pave the way, laying foundations for a new biological era. Across the vast continents of the Cretaceous, dinosaurs dominated every landscape, from open plains to dense fern and broadleaf forests. Giant herbivores moved in herds, massive bodies pressing down on the ground, generating vibrations that resonated throughout forests and grasslands. As herds moved, towering canopies swayed, and sunlight filtered through gaps, dancing on their skin and hard scales. Cunning predators, observed, moved with agility, eyes sweeping the space, bodies flexible and poised to strike any prey entering their hunting range. Every limb, thrust, leap, or retreat became a living note in a predator-prey symphony lasting millions of years. Above, the first birds appeared, delicate and refined, primitive wings beating with the wind, gliding through dense canopies, observing surroundings and seeking food. They opened a completely new evolutionary pathway, movement through air, exploiting spaces unreachable by large terrestrial organisms, while becoming key links in the ecological network. Their primitive feathers provided both insulation and support for flight, creating a unique morphology from which modern birds would evolve. Beneath the canopy, small mammals slipped through burrows, water channels, and underbrush. Small in size, but equipped with keen senses, flexible muscles, and stealthy foraging abilities, they survived in a world dominated by enormous dinosaurs. These organisms accumulated survival experience, tested strategies for avoidance, hunting, and reproduction, laying the foundation for future mammals. Their pace of life was slower than that of the mighty dinosaurs, but more sophisticated and strategic, quietly reflecting natural selection in a high-pressure environment. The entire Cretaceous landscape became a living stage. Mighty dinosaurs ruling the land, pioneering birds in the air, small mammals concealed under ancient forests. Life occurred simultaneously, hunting, avoiding, reproducing, moving, and interacting with the environmental, composing a continuous biological symphony, rich in rhythm and form. The dominance of dinosaurs was not merely a display of muscular power, but also a testament to the refined development of body structures, senses, and behaviors. Amid this vibrant rhythm of life, different evolutionary lineages continued to accumulate experience, test survival strategies, and explore new ways to endure. All were preparing for the final climax, the Chicxulub asteroid hurtling toward Earth, unleashing fire, darkness, and absolute chaos, ending the Cretaceous, and opening a silence from which small creatures began to carve pathways, the prelude to a new era of life after the dinosaurs. When the Chicxulub asteroid struck Earth, the colossal energy released fire and shock waves across continents. The sky was filled with dense dust and darkness, blocking sunlight for months. Oceans boiled, waters heated beyond the tolerance of many species. Broadleaf forests and towering ferns ignited, flames rolling with the resinous scent of trees, while layers of red dust spread across plains like streaks of pain across the planet. Most of the giant creatures, from massive dinosaurs to cunning predators, vanished in seas of fire and boiling waters, leaving the earth in a hushed silence where once majestic rhythms now barely echoed, like the faint heartbeat of life struggling to return in this desolate space. Small organisms, early birds, tiny mammals, burrowing animals, and microorganisms surviving in moist sediments quietly sustained life. They moved slowly, emerging from burrows, water channels, rock crevices, and thick dust layers, seeking shelter and remaining food sources. Compact body structures, primitive feathers or scales to regulate temperature, keen senses to detect prey and danger, rapid reproductive ability, and flexible adaptability became the keys to survival in this utterly devastated world. Light filtered through thick dust, tinting charred tree shadows, reflecting off darkened ground, slipping between rocks and red sediment layers. Slow life became exceedingly precious. Every step, every limb stretch, every flap of a primitive bird's wing was a survival trial, a note in a new symphony being written from the ashes. They re-examined survival strategies, hunting and avoidance behaviors, reconstructing ecological networks once dominated by dinosaurs. From these biological remnants, a new world began to take shape. Small creatures opened pathways once controlled by gigantic species, gradually rebuilding food chains, re-establishing terrestrial, aquatic, and aerial ecosystems. Their slow but persistent rhythm laid the foundation for the next wave of biodiversity. Modern birds would evolve from primitive birds, mammals from small creatures navigating the underbrush, while microorganisms, fungi, and plants would regenerate, filling ecological voids. Through the flow of time, a guiding refrain sounded like a deep, resonant note. In the silence after the rain of fire, small creatures began to carve pathways. It was a prophecy for the post-dinosaur era, where small, quiet, and resilient organisms, through adaptive strength and patience, wrote the next chapter in the history of life on Earth. From ashes, step by step, slow yet persistent biological rhythms fostered the emergence of a richer, more diverse and intricate world, ushering in a new biological era lasting tens of millions of years. After the mass extinction at the end of the Cretaceous, Earth became a vast stage where slow but steady rhythms created space for new life forms. Enormous ecological gaps provided opportunities for mammals, birds, and insects to proliferate, both in number and form, gradually enriching the natural world in unprecedented ways. On land, the first small mammals navigated through underbrush, moving along water channels, burrows, and primitive forests. Their small size allowed them to avoid remaining predators. Keen senses detected prey, and flexible limbs executed jumps, climbs, and digging. Over millions of years, these organisms grew in size, limbs strengthened, teeth and digestive systems adapted to exploit diverse food sources from plants and insects to smaller animals. Broadleaf forests, grasslands, plains, and riverbanks became vast training grounds, where each individual operated a slow rhythm of life, testing strategies for foraging, movement, and avoidance, accumulating evolutionary experience for future lineages. In the air, birds emerged, initially with delicate wings and primitive feathers, moving through gaps in dense canopies. They sought food, avoided predators, and performed intricate aerial dances. Some ventured into open plains and river margins. Others glided through flooded forests and tropical broadleaf woodlands, becoming vital links in aerial ecological networks. Each wing beat, each maneuver, each evasive turn became a note in the symphony of evolution, where natural selection tested every flight, hunting, and survival strategy in parallel. Insects flourished, diverse in form, size, and behavior. Pollinators, sap feeders, small predators, and detritivores formed crucial ecological foundations, connecting plants to mammals and birds. In swampy forests, dense swarms of insects darted through canopies, flickering in light filtering through old sediments and scattered, decaying leaves, creating a vivid scene in which every movement of wings, limbs, or antennae reflected the slow but continuous rhythm of the geological pulse. Habitats expanded through the Paleocene, Eocene, Oligocene, and Miocene, from humid tropical forests and vast grasslands to emerging highlands and nascent savannas. Large mammals dominated the grasslands and forests, moving in herds, their footsteps causing canopies to tremble in rhythm. Birds soared above, sometimes diving to hunt or evade predators. Insects swarmed the vegetation, serving both as food sources and as vital participants in ecological cycles. Sunlight filtered through the leaves, pierced lingering mist and sediments from the age of dinosaurs, creating patches of light and shadow that emphasized the slow, measured rhythm of geological time. Life proceeded slowly but steadily, accumulating evolutionary experience, testing bodily structures, hunting and avoidance strategies, and forming complex food webs. Each individual, each herd, each swarm of insects became a link in a symphony spanning millions of years, laying the groundwork for the emergence of humans. Across forests, grasslands, caves, and rivers, primates began to develop refining locomotor skills, memory, social interaction, and survival strategies, the prelude to the appearance of Homo habilis, Homo erectus, and Homo sapiens, and the dawn of culture, language, tools, and collective memory in this world. The slow rhythm of geology intertwined with the rapid tempo of biology, the careful steps of mammals, the intricate wing beats of birds, the dense swarms of insects in the canopy, all forming a vibrant ecological symphony of motion and experimentation, setting the stage for the intellectual and cultural flourishing of humans. Millions of years later, after the extinction of the dinosaurs, Earth entered a new climatic cycle, where slow but persistent changes shaped landscapes and ecosystems. The first ice ages began to appear, with ice sheets expanding from highlands to plains, glaciers scraping slowly across rocks and sediment layers, carving into newly deposited geological strata. Sea levels contracted and expanded with alternating warming and cooling, creating mudflats, lagoons, and barren plains interspersed with glaciated mountains. Meanwhile, savannas emerged in lowlands, with dense grasses interspersed with shrubs, creating expansive habitats for large mammals and herbivores moving in herds, gradually structuring terrestrial food chains. Scattered forests, lakes, and rivers became refuges, sources of food, and experimental grounds for new biodiversity. The slow rhythm of geological processes, glaciers advancing, sediments settling, climate changing, merged with the fast biological tempo of each organism, producing an ecological composition both persistent and complex. Within this ecological tapestry, primates began to appear and evolve. Small arboreal primates moved cautiously along high branches, exploring their environment with keen eyes and agile limbs. They learned to select food, avoid predators, and navigate dense foliage. Over millions of years, forelimbs became increasingly dexterous, fingers capable of grasping, and sensory organs refined, allowing primates to manipulate food, employ rudimentary tools, and interact within small social groups. Forests and wetlands served as natural laboratories, where survival skills, locomotor strategies, and social communication were continuously tested. The formation of open savannas introduced new challenges: continuous sunlight on exposed ground, fluctuating temperatures, limited shade, and the presence of large predators. Primates adjusted their behavior, descending to the ground to forage, moving between shrubs and water sources, and adapting to dry or flood seasons. These pressures promoted memory, group coordination, and social behaviors, forming the first foundations of complex community organization. Primates grew larger, senses sharpened, bodies became agile, and coordinated behavior generated a dynamic ecological network, linking forests, grasslands, and aquatic zones. The slow pace of geological time during the ice ages, the centimeter by centimeter movement of glaciers, sediment deposition, gradual climate shifts contrasted sharply with the rapid tempo of life on land and in water. Under this persistent but steady pressure, evolution proceeded, testing adaptation while opening new pathways. In this continuously changing environment, primates not only survived but evolved, developing refined locomotor abilities, cognition, and social skills, laying the groundwork for the eventual emergence of Homo habilis, Homo erectus, and Homo sapiens. These species began to harness tools, fire, social structures, language, and culture, allowing for the first time a living being to transcend biological limits, accumulate knowledge, transmit it, and create collective memory. From this point, Earth became more than a place for survival and reproduction. It transformed into a stage for intellect, creativity, and culture. The slow rhythm of geological time blended with the rapid pace of evolutionary change, composing a symphony spanning millions of years, ushering in an era where biology intertwined with intelligence, and memory and history were written by a unique species, humans. After millions of years of evolution across forests, open savannas, and riverbanks, primates gradually developed physical and behavioral traits that allowed them to exceed the biological constraints imposed on other animals. Around 2.5 million years ago, Homo habilis appeared, small but agile, with dexterous forelimbs and an astonishing ability to manipulate rudimentary tools. Chipped stones, sticks, and natural materials became the first implements, enabling intentional food acquisition and marking the species' initial direct impact on the environment. Early steps on open ground, hand-eye coordination, and the ability to observe and learn laid the foundations for intelligence and primitive social organization. The life rhythm of Homo habilis merged with the ecological flow, where water, vegetation, and herbivores influenced movement, foraging, and predator avoidance. Next, Homo erectus emerged around 1.8 million years ago, taller and sturdier, moving adeptly across expansive terrain. Mastery of fire marked a turning point in the relationship between organism and environment, warming, cooking food, protecting the group from predators, and extending their range from dense forests to plains, low hills, and river valleys. Homo erectus developed cooperative hunting skills, food gathering, shelter building, and, crucially, the ability to transmit survival knowledge to subsequent generations. Forming early communities, Homo erectus became a central link in the new ecological network, where each individual not only survived, but contributed to the resilience and survival of the group. Finally, Homo sapiens appeared around 300,000 years ago, with a flexible body, abstract intelligence, and developed language. Sophisticated tools from chipped stones and hunting weapons to domestic implements enhanced hunting, gathering, and food processing. Homo sapiens societies formed on foundations of cooperation, knowledge sharing, and cultural development, from collective memory, belief systems, rock art, and cave painting to early architecture. Humans not only survived and adapted, but actively shaped their environment. Survival skills became cultural heritage, leaving an imprint across time and space throughout this process. The slow rhythm of geological time, the gradual formation of savannas, forests, and plains, combined with the rapid biological tempo of organisms to create a continuously moving stage. Each step, each tool, each fire, each lesson passed down became a note in the long symphony of evolution, opening a chapter where biology merged with intelligence. Humans emerged beyond biological limits, becoming the authors of memory, culture, and Earth's history, where intellect connected biological pasts to the future of civilization, inaugurating an unprecedented era in the history of life. After the disappearance of the giant dinosaurs, Earth entered a new ecological phase, where mammals, birds, insects, and small primates occupied every corner of forests, grasslands, valleys, and riverbanks. This world unfolded over millions of years, with the slow rhythm of geological time glaciers advancing and retreating, plains rising and sinking, vegetation shifting with climatic cycles intertwined with the rapid tempo of life. In this dynamic and diverse landscape, primates evolved, gradually acquiring abilities beyond the inherent biological limits: thinking, tool use, social cooperation, and long-term memory. Homo habilis, appearing around 2.5 million years ago, were small but agile, with dexterous forelimbs and keen eyes. They learned to use chipped stones, sticks, bones, and other natural materials to extract food, opening the possibility of deliberate environmental manipulation. Stones struck, cut, and ground served not only survival but also left the first traces of planning, learning, and transmitting experience to the group. In the rhythm of the forest, Homo habilis functioned as a sophisticated link, exploiting resources, observing predators, memorizing terrain and food, and accumulating skills to pass to future generations. Homo erectus, appearing around 1.8 million years ago, advanced these abilities with mastery of fire. Fire not only provided warmth during cold nights and allowed the cooking of difficult-to-digest food, but also created a safe space for the group to gather, observe, and communicate. Coordinated hunting, food gathering, and group protection became more sophisticated. Each individual became a link in the early social network, where reflexes, observation, and cooperative strategies were developed and remembered. Fire became the center of collective memory, a place where knowledge, life experience, and survival skills were passed through generations. Laying the foundation for the first complex societies, Homo sapiens, appearing around 300,000 years ago, reached the peak of creativity and communication. Language evolved from simple sounds to abstract symbols, enabling the exchange of ideas, hunting plans, and knowledge recording. Sophisticated tools emerged from chipped stones, bows and arrows, spears to domestic and decorative implements. Art appeared, cave paintings, small sculptures, personal ornaments, all reflecting human intellect, aesthetics, and memory. Homo sapiens societies became complex. Labor division, cooperative hunting, beliefs, laws, and traditions all combined into a rich cultural network. Each individual became both a living being and a preserver, transmitter, and creator of memory, allowing future generations to access knowledge and adaptive abilities far beyond any previous species. In this context, tools and fire became formulas of mind and body, opening the capacity for active influence over the environment. Language served as a bridge, connecting the intellect of generations. Culture became a living record of survival, will, and abstract thought. Homo sapiens stepped beyond inherent biological limits, not only surviving in the natural world, but shaping it, building societies, recording history, and creating art, BRBORL sequences. Skills and memories accumulated over hundreds of thousands of years elevated life to a new plane, where biology merged with intelligence, and a single species began to write memory, culture, and history, inaugurating an era in which consciousness itself became a creative force within the biosphere. Homo sapiens was no longer merely a creature among forests, grasslands, or riverbanks. It became the first entity to surpass all biological constraints that bound most species. Intelligence, tools, fire, language, and culture generated an entirely new force, the ability to remember, transmit, and intentionally shape the environment. Each tool became a mark of consciousness, each fire a center of knowledge where individuals gathered, observed, learned, and transmitted experience. Every word, symbol, or cave painting became a living record, accumulating experience and insight across time, forming a collective intellectual treasury over hundreds of thousands of years. Homo sapiens continually learned to observe and interpret the world, from recognizing seasonal cycles, navigating rivers, and tracking prey, to planning hunts, constructing shelters, managing fire, and defending the group against natural hazards and predators. All experiences were remembered, transmitted, and refined. The capacity for cooperation and knowledge sharing transformed individual beings into a biological social-cultural network, where each survival skill no longer belonged solely to an individual but became a shared legacy transcending biological lifespans, making humans the authors of history, stepping beyond biological limits. Homo sapiens wrote memory of environments, survival strategies, communities, and self. These memories preserved experience while guiding creativity, technology, art, and future cultural forms. Early cave paintings, rudimentary musical instruments, chipped stone tools, and primitive language systems all attested the ability to record life beyond the confines of the body and biological lifespan. Biology and intellect intertwined, turning Earth into a stage for a form of life unprecedented. A species capable of recording, transmitting, analyzing, and forecasting, elevating existence to consciousness, culture, and knowledge throughout this process. The slow rhythm of geological time glaciers, expanding, rivers meandering, grasslands forming and transforming contrasted sharply with the fast, flexible, and creative tempo of humans. Homo sapiens learned to integrate with Earth's flow, exploiting resources, reshaping environments, and creating a memory system beyond time. Survival strategies, understanding of nature, ecological observation, and social cooperation were continuously accumulated, forming the foundation for civilization. This marked a special evolutionary convergence, a species transcending bodily limits, transforming individual experience into collective memory, merging biology with intellect, and creating culture. Homo sapiens not only survived but became the keeper of memory, the architect of history, turning each pulse of life into an indelible mark on the planet. This was the great turning point, where biology fused with consciousness, inaugurating an era in which humans, through intelligence and creativity, wrote the story of the entire Earth. The history of life on Earth is not merely a sequence of past events, but a continuous flow where every advance, every upheaval, every extinction, and every biological bloom records the profound imprint of time and environment. From the primitive organisms drifting in Cambrian oceans, the first explorers of terrestrial life, to the dinosaurs dominating land, birds gliding across the sky, mammals exploring savannas and glacial valleys, and finally, Homo sapiens, the species that records memory. Each chapter is part of an unceasing grand journey, where life continually experiments, transforms, and adapts. If all of Earth's history were compressed into a single 4.5 billion year rotation, humans would appear only in the final instant. Yet, in that fleeting moment, Homo sapiens became the first authors capable of remembering, transmitting, and intentionally shaping the environment. Slowly moving glaciers, erupting volcanoes, shifting oceans and forests, red soils and accumulating sediment soil proceeded to the rhythm of geological time, while the tempo of living beings, from unicellular organisms, insects, birds, and mammals to humans, merged in a silent yet ever-evolving symphony. Every organism, large or small, contributed to a complex network, recording the interaction between biology and environment, survival and extinction within this vast tableau. The question of life's tomorrow resonates. If 4.5 billion years were a single day, humans would appear only in the final instant. The remaining question, what will tomorrow hold for life? It is not merely an abstract inquiry, but a reminder of responsibility and opportunity. Earth continues to change, ecosystems continue to operate, and new rhythms of life are emerging. Homo sapiens, with intelligence, creativity, and perception, becomes a companion not to dominate, but to understand, preserve, and shape the future. The journey is far from over. Life continues forward, silently yet persistently, full of surprises, yet governed by patterns, inviting humans to assume the role of both observer and active participant in history. Intellect and culture, memory and behavior all converge in a continuous flow, where biology meets consciousness, transforming Earth into a vast stage where past, present, and future coexist, and each new day of life continues to be written.